Hi, welcome to the sermon you're not getting this week. Today we're looking at Acts 2, verses 42 through 47. They devoted themselves to the apostles' teaching and fellowship, to the breaking of bread and the prayers. Awe came upon everyone because many wonders and signs were being done through the apostles. All who believed and were together had all things in common. They would sell their possessions and goods and distribute the proceeds to all as any had need. Day by day, as they spent much time together in the temple, they broke bread at home and ate their food with glad and generous hearts, praising God and having the goodwill of all the people. And day by day, the Lord added to their number those who were being saved. Here ends our reading. So I have long heard the phrase, the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. And that sounds to be the exact opposite of what's happening here. There's generosity and goodwill, and they share everything. And there's not this strict hierarchy of who's rich and who's poor, and a differentiation along the lines of socioeconomic class. They're all just together and enjoying life and enjoying one another's company and praying and worshiping God. And that sounds beautiful. They must have figured something out, because we must have forgotten whatever they figured out, because we still are struggling with this the rich get richer and the poor get poorer thing. And I want to talk a little bit about why I think that is. um, this hasn't always been the case throughout history, but more or less it's been a factor, and perhaps more so now than at other points in time, that success is measured by money, by wealth, by personal capital. Success is measured by money. And not only is that the case, but also your value as a person is also measured by money. Or we could say that your value as a person is measured by your success, and your success is measured by your money. Now, if you don't believe me, I mean, I think it seems sort of intuitive. If you see a very well dressed person in a very nice car, there's a sort of gut assumption that they have money, right? That they must be successful in some way. And as much as we would like to say that we are loving Christians toward all people, if you saw a person sitting in a nice suit right next to a fancy car, sitting on a park bench, you'd probably be more comfortable with that person there than if you saw a homeless person in raggedy clothes. It's just part of how we define people, part of how we parse people out, part of how we separate ourselves from people. And sometimes that's a safe assumption to make. But oftentimes it's just hurtful. But it's just something that happens in our heads. But this affects the world of business in a really profound way. I think as long as success is measured by money, and success is the measure of your value, I think we will continue to see the rich get richer and the poor get poorer. See, the way a business succeeds is by being able to accumulate enough capital to expand, invest, grow somehow. Think about it. If you've got your own private business, if you want to be able to make even more money, the best way to do that is to be able to open up another location, right? Or to invest in the market somehow in ways that are going to give you a lot of money down the road. And the way to do that is to accumulate as much money at the top as you can. So if we have two, sort of equal stores that are both sort of working in the same industry, but one has a business owner who loves their employees and treats them like family and loves and respects the customers and will never, give anyone a bad deal and makes sure all of the workers are well paid and have good benefits. And you have another business owner who does not have nearly so many scruples and good intentions. um, they might not pay their workers well, pay them starvation wages, and not give them benefits. and force them to work long, hard hours and not give them vacations or very rarely only give them as many vacation days as they're sort of forced to give, and maybe overcharge the customer sometime. And that sounds awful, but which of those two is going to be able to probably open up a new shop? Who's making more money, setting aside more money at the top? It's the one who's less scrupulous. And we might say that there was a time in which that sort of thing would be punished by the consumers or punished by the workers, but more and more we're seeing that happen less. It's hard to even know who's doing the right things, who's doing practicing business well. And so people will often sort of get tricked into buying things from people who aren't treating their employees well, who don't care about their workers, and who are comfortable overcharging customers. And so they end up getting more money. They can outmaneuver, out advertise, undersell, or undercut prices to their competitors, and then they win out. And so what ends up happening is the people that rise to the top are the people who are willing to hurt others to rise. Because what matters is making money. And if that's the only thing that matters at the end of the day, then of course, the people who will rise will be the people who don't care about other people as much as they care about money. And it's not just in the business world, it's also in the social world. You've heard of keeping up with the Joneses. This is something that's been true in American history for a long period of time, and I'm sure has been true of history far before America. But I know I've read, works of historians that talk about how those really nice, fancy plantation houses in the South that everyone thinks must come from people who had a lot of money sitting around, not true. They just financed everything and went deeply into debt. But everyone had to go deeply into debt because if your success in life is tied to your money, the way to show your success, to show your value as a person, is to pretend that you have a lot of money. So some people owed tons of money secretly, but they threw lavish parties and convinced everyone that they were the pillars of the community, that they deserved a lot of respect, and they got a lot of respect. And this is still something we have today. There are people who will far exceed their financial limitations to try to show off to other people. And if they can ride the balance right, they might be deep in debt for their entire lives, but they can trick people into respecting them because they have the nice cars, the nice houses, the nice clothes. They look the part of a respectable person. And so they cheat people into giving them respect. In a world that values that measures success in money and measures your own personal worth in your success, it is inevitable that there will always be rat races. There will always be people keeping up with the Joneses. There will always be people going into debt to try to look the part. There will always be people making themselves the pillar of the community by lying to other people about how much money they have or debt they don't have. There will always be people who are cheating other people and hurting other people to scramble for the top, because that is what we care about as a society. We value success. Now, hopefully within the church, we are a little insulated by this. We also value love and kindness and generosity, but we aren't completely exempt from it. We are Christians, but we're also part of our wider culture. And our culture values success and showiness and money and fast cars and big houses. And we are not completely protected from that. We too end up valuing those things probably much more than we should. And that's how we measure value and worth and success. The early Christians did away with all of that. By pooling their resources together, by saying everything that was shared, not only was there certainly enough to go around, everyone had food, everyone could break bread together, but also they did away with the social stratification. There weren't layers of people. There weren't people who were more trusted and more respected in society, or if they were, they got there for completely different reasons. People did not become pillars of the society in the ancient church by having the most money or the fanciest clothes, the fastest cars, or whatever the ancient equivalent was, or the biggest houses. They became pillars in the community by loving, by showing patience and kindness and generosity, by being there for people, by praying for people, by speaking about Jesus honestly and faithfully. They did perhaps what might be the ancient equivalent of being the one to stay at the social hall until everyone else had left the charity because you wanted to make sure all the chairs got picked up and the floor got cleaned. The equivalent of you showed up at church early to do the thankless job of picking up sticks after a windstorm. The pillars of the community were the people who set aside their own personal goals and ambitions and didn't care about dressing in the fanciest clothes or having the nicest stuff or the best house, but were the people who just showed up and cared and didn't necessarily do it for gratitude or honor or respect, but that's how they earned respect, by humbly letting go of all the social charm, all the social niceties, all the things that people are striving for to show their social worth and let that social worth be reflected. They did away with all of that because they just shared everything. There was no one who could use stuff or money to get ahead of anyone else, to earn more respect than anyone else. Everyone was respected simply because they were children of God. And there was no higher way to respect anyone else. I hope we can find that again in our world, in our time. I hope we can find that simple joy and love of sharing everything in common and being with one another and breaking bread together in joy and with generous hearts. I hope we can regain the joy of the early church after the resurrection, who realized that in light of this miracle of Jesus's rising from the dead, of death being conquered, that status didn't need to be reflected in stuff or money, houses, or fancy jewelry, that their status was a gift given to them by God, and it is the greatest status that anyone could ask for. A sinner redeemed, an adopted child of God. What more could we possibly want than that? And if the world, and maybe the world didn't respect them, but it didn't matter, because they didn't need worldly respect or worldly social status. They didn't need to be seen to be rich or powerful or famous or eloquent or anything like that. All that mattered is what God had done for them. May we find that again and simply rejoice in what God has done for us, and let all the striving after stuff and status fall aside. Amen.